Welcome everybody to our opening, our public opening of Sea Change 2020. Um, we're delighted that we can be here with you on Facebook Live and also welcome some of the artists that were part of this exhibition. Um, just a little history about it. Um, Sea Change 2020 really is a companion show to a show that we did in 2017 called Rise Up. And Rise Up was a response by artists with their expressions to the election that had happened. Um, and it was a powerful show. These were artists, all mid-career artists who were friends of San Francisco Arts Education Project. Some of them had been mentors with our program, and some of them had just been friends of our program in various different ways. It was a really interesting show because it was an opportunity for artists to give expression to the way that they felt about what was happening in the country and in the world. And one of the things that was notable about this show, in addition to it being a very interesting show in our gallery at Minnesota Street Project, um, everybody included prompts for young people to take the themes and interests that the artists had and use them to make their own work. And so it's something that we've done for most of our shows. And so when we got deep into this administration and we were getting towards the election, we decided once again to use our gallery and give the gallery over to artists. In this case, to only artists who have been mentors for us, in many cases over the past 30 years. And all of them, as always, are artists of note, are in the midst of their expressive lives as artists, but also are tremendously generous as mentors. So we wanted Sea Change 2020 in April, and that's when it was due to open, to have the artists give voice to their strong feelings about the world once again, and to our nation in any way that they wanted to do that. And then what happened. The world closed down. And so one of the things that we were hoping to change 2020 also was, by the way, have performances in our gallery and have performances in the marvelous atrium at Minnesota Street Project. This we will have to wait for. But what we don't have to wait for, and I'm so thrilled about, is to be able to show this work finally. It took quite some time to both put this exhibition up on the site of our own website, but it's also on the site at Minnesota Street Project. They call it the adjacent site. And so for everybody that is here with us tonight, you can look carefully and slowly at all of the work on either site and see these beautiful pieces that have been contributed, both moving images as well as images. I really want to give the floor now to the artists that are here to have them talk about the work that they're showing both in this exhibition, but also because it's such an interesting time for artists. It's a time where we are more isolated. For some artists, I think this has been a boon from what my conversations have yielded. For some artists, it has been a time where they have had to be fallow and wait again for what it's going to be like when we're all together again. But I would really like to hear from the artists and have them address you and have their work spotlighted as they talk about what it's like for them and what this work has been for this exhibition. Lauren, shall we begin with you?
Since I'm here?
Yes. Since you're here, yes, absolutely.
Here. Sure, I'd be happy to start. Lauren Elder, based in Oakland, California. I spent 5 wonderful, rich, challenging years working with the Arts Education Project. And that was at the end of the last millennium, believe it or not.
Right.
I'm going to, what's being featured is a project that I started back in February before the world turned upside down. And as it happens, it was quite adaptable to the conditions that we're in now. It's a group project that was executed outdoors, and then which allowed a number of people to come together and work in my patio with appropriate distance, and then it's shown outdoors. So there haven't really been any hindrances on the work itself. It's a great example or template for other people that if they want to continue doing group work. The idea came to me in the course of my frequent hikes through the Mountain View Cemetery here in Oakland, which is just this amazing 226-acre cemetery that was created by Frederick Law Olmsted, the designer of Central Park and a good deal of the campuses for UC Berkeley. I was struck by the really rich Victorian and Edwardian cult of death and how people went to great lengths to celebrate and honor and memorialize folks. So what you're seeing are sketches that I did based on some of the tombstones that are there in the cemetery or just invented by me. And I wanted to dedicate them to species, animal species that had gone extinct during the Anthropocene. So I thought if we make this big a fuss about humans, why aren't we making a fuss about animals as well? Many of which we don't even know their names or what they look like. So I did some initial research and selected 6 or 8 species and did these conceptual sketches to share both with the artists who are going to be making these paper mache tombstones and also with the host organization Extinction Rebellion, who was going to utilize them initially for street actions. Well, the street actions have been put on hold until COVID goes away. But we went ahead and continued to make these tombstones, and they were used at the El Cerrito Cemetery for a mock Victorian funeral. Various women in Extinction Rebellion showed up in black Victorian garb with black masks, carried flowers, laid flowers on the graves, and then gave up, you know, we will not be held back fist. And then they went into storage briefly and then emerged again for Day of the Dead and Halloween. People took them and put them on their front lawns or front porches to memorialize the animals instead of the usual sort of, well, in the case of Halloween, the sort of thrift store creepy stuff. And in terms of Day of the Dead, instead of honoring one of your own ancestors, you're honoring one of the fellow creatures on Earth. So Verda Alexander and I did the first run of these to get ready in April for what we thought was going to be the launch of this show. And then other artists joined us, and I think we have 15 or 20 of these tombstones in circulation now. They're just made out of paper mache, and they're very lightweight and very durable. Each person got to pick a species that they wanted to honor. And some people now have the tombstones at home and others are in storage with me. So that's what the project amounts to at this point. And I expect that in the future, Extinction Rebellion will be using them for street actions because they're easy to carry, and then you can plunk them down right in an intersection and create an instant cemetery or blockade a building if you're so inclined. So they're good for guerrilla action. So I think that's what I have to say. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer.
I love that piece. I love the drawings, everything.
Oh, thank you. There were a tremendous number of species from Hawaii. There was, and they were not all done in by tourism. Some of them were done in by Native Hawaiians. We cycle through again, there's a bird who had just little tiny yellow feathers right here in its throat. And so they would, and down below its wings. And so they would kill the birds just to get the yellow feathers and then use them to make the capes for the royalty. It's this one right here.
Yeah.
So contrary to popular belief that all Native peoples had a harmonious and respectful existence with nature, this wasn't 100% true.
Lauren, I just had, well, I have a lot of questions, but one question I have is, are you intending for this to continue? I mean,
Yes,
sadly, there are more species, right?
Oh, absolutely. This can go on indefinitely.
Yeah.
And we still hold builds here in my patio. So
Okay.
people can check in with me to find out when another build is happening, and
Okay.
we'll just extend, whoever wants to show up is invited. We supply the materials usually and any tips in terms of construction, and then people have a field day creating them.
Thank
So
you. Yeah. Fantastic. Well, we had every hope to make a graveyard at Minnesota Street Project in our gallery, but sadly that didn't happen. But it's so good to see the work.
yeah, it was a very, very gratifying project because, like, as I said, so many people were able to continue making and being active given the restrictions of COVID.
Right. Right. Thank you.
And also having a chance to give voice to or form to their feelings.
Right.
Because there's a lot of grief. Extinction Rebellion was particularly interested because they tend to be can be a kind of heady and conceptual bunch of folks.
Yeah.
And they said, oh, this is great because it really brings it down into the feeling level.
Right.
And allows people to experience their rage and their grief.
It is grief because it's loss. I mean, it's truly loss.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, thank you. I see Richard Olson up there at the top. Richard, would you like to address us?
Not undress, but yeah, dress. So about my piece in the show,
Yes.
called Dumb Trump, or no, it's called November 3rd is Garbage Day.
Yes.
So, and I actually made posters I put up around. So that was just an addition to that. But
Where did the posters go? Sorry.
I had little books of them and people tore them out and just put them around the city.
Oh, they did. Okay.
So, but the the show, so it's up there. Just had I can't see it really. I think it's about 4 pieces. I just went through, I didn't make the piece for the show. I just went through a collection of stuff I had called Tunes Are People Too. And I just picked some that they weren't like explicitly about Trump, but they inferred different things about him. I mean, clearly, he does kind of look like the Tasmanian devil. So I got a garbage can and put him in at the end. And going up, the one right behind us, one of the first tune ones I made, which was just like the ears of Bugs Bunny in a field of abstraction. It kind of reminded me of like hiding from ICE or hiding from the authorities. Alert, your ears are alert, but you're still hiding. The next one with the yellow was, again, if you look closely, it's always the feet of all these different tune people. So the yellow, it could be a detention center, it could be the wall. Again, they weren't explicit comments, but they had references to what was going on. The top one could easily be, the child taken away from his parents, or his or her parents, put in these cages. What else, showing the fear and vulnerability. They actually, when the idea was to have it at Minnesota Street at the gallery, there was many more that got into, Black oppression, all kinds of different things. But in my studio, I hit the ceiling, so I couldn't bring as far as they intended to be. So that was pretty much it, yeah. So.
Thank you. Richard, have you found this sort of isolating time, a fertile time for your work?
Maybe in a neurotic way, there's not much more for me to do, but I'm not one of the people that would say it's a good thing because I have more time in my studio. Like everybody, it's taxing in terms of changing my life and obviously financially having shows and
Right.
just an example of Lauren's not being able to put the actual sculptures there and see them. It's a whole different, I missed out on that. I was able to see the two-dimensional stuff, which I love. But so it's, no, I would say there's nothing good about the COVID or the government at this point. There's a lot of things wrong, but you try to make do what you can do. And, I've been changing miles right now and doing stuff, but I miss going to galleries. I miss, seeing regular folks that I see on a regular basis.
Right. This body of work, the tunes, though, you have done a lot of work. Is that not true?
Yeah, I have a lot that hasn't been shown. I mean, there was some shown at the Minnesota Street Project. I think I actually sold some too, but I think I showed like
There were
8 there for the
8 of them.
summer thing
Yeah.
that are different from these. Yeah, and I did a whole lot of different small pieces. Yeah, lots. And I use Instagram to kind of put some of that stuff out and, show them or give them to my friends,
Well, we're delighted we can show them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have anything else you want to add about the work?
No, I mean, no, I mean, just looking at the work of the show that I haven't seen it concretely, but virtually, I really love just the different aspects, politically and culturally that it touched on, and also the different styles that it uses. So, and that's just one thing I was really happy to be in the show and contribute to that same kind of thing. All the work is different, but it all speaks to something real and something relevant. I mean, again, it's bad. It's good to say it, and it's bad to say, but COVID and all that stuff, the government's response to that doesn't take away from the reality of what all the artists in this show are talking about, all those issues. Extremely relevant. And I mean, that's one thing I loved about Lauren's stuff was, I remember seeing some shows a number of years ago, was dealing with similar theme in a very different way, but it's just, I mean, even, I'm not trying to read into her work, but I know Zoe is part of the show, right? And just even the connection of that, where she's dealing with, the biosphere and all these different things, and then Lauren's coming at it from a different angle of just of like how, these animals are, you read about it every day. It's whether it's the yaks or whether it's whatever, becoming extinct, or and certainly Trump's policies. I mean, I'm from Alaska, and what he's doing up there is going to have serious effects on wildlife and blah blah blah. We all know. Anyway, but I love that diversity and how it all kind of comes together in the show. So I thank you and Arts Ed for doing that.
Oh, good. Thank you. Thank you, Rich. I see Renee Girler here. Renee, can you address us a little bit?
Sure. Hi.
Hi, nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Thanks for having me.
Oh, of course. Thanks for participating with us.
Yeah. My pleasure. Yeah, so the piece, just thinking back today, I was remembering when I made the piece, I was thinking about this Berkeley landmark. Actually, I didn't write about it in the statement, but the Temple of the Wings. Have you ever been there?
Of course, this is where the Isadora Duncan dancers used to dance.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the drawing is definitely inspired by that structure up in the Berkeley Hills. And so I visited that site and became fascinated by it. And it was a recreated Greek temple and built in 1910, I think, or around that time. And built by a very well-to-do family. And they wanted to live outside, and they were inspired by Greek culture of living outside and kind of getting back to the land. So I was really fascinated with this idea of this kind of back to the land movement that happened in Berkeley in 1910. And then I just kind of wanted to create a drawing that conveyed that feeling of that magical place. If you've ever been there, you know it kind of resonates. It has this kind of energy about it, and it's now enclosed, but at one time it was a temple that was open air, and the family lived in it, and they lived in robes, and just the whole thing is just kind of out of this world to read about. So that was what I was thinking about. And when you gave me the prompt of the show, I was definitely thinking about 2020 and how it's this opportunity to sort of embrace all of these ideas, and as we have the technology to do it and get back to the land and embrace this sort of, poetic ethos. So that's what I was thinking about with the drawing.
So it's aspirational. I mean, you
Yeah.
can't change unless you want change, unless you know what change feels like for you.
Mm-hmm.
It's beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So, it's a funny thing. I was, as a child, I was a dancer. We used to dance on the lawn in
Uh-huh.
Tucson, Arizona, in just that way with little robes. That was the first kind of dancing that I did. So
Wow.
I know very well about this, and also,
Great.
yeah, and also Isadora Duncan and her father, I don't know if you know this, very related to the Art Institute.
Yeah.
He was, this, right? Okay, so and the Transcendentalist movement and all of I know, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I
I'm
think
so glad you told me about this.
it's so fascinating to go there. Have you visited?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So, yeah, I love all of those connections to the Bay Area, and just how the Bay Area is really steeped in these spaces, of people really creating these idealistic architectural monuments. And so I was really thinking about that a lot in this series. And like I said, I called it optimistic geometry, because I think there's this optimism in this sort of geometrical form. And you see it, in the 60s and the 70s and the 90s, people continue to kind of explore geometric forms in architecture. And yeah, so definitely inspired by that.
Yeah. That's so interesting. I'm so glad you talked about that, because it also, I mean, in a way, that place was also not only a building, but sort of a set design, a sort of a space, to be the backdrop, as it were, for performance of a certain sort, harking back. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's lovely. Renee, I'm curious. We had a conversation. Now it's many many months ago.
Yeah.
Seems like many years ago, right?
It does feel like many years. It feels
Crazy,
like 5 years ago.
right? When I called,
Yeah.
and we talked about that your drawing now was a kind of result of a new way of working, partly because you're a mother, partly because you're in the studio that you're in. Are you considering going back to making three-dimensional work, or is that something that you miss? Is it something that you want to get back to?
Yeah, definitely. And I am making 3D work. It's just on a much smaller scale. but previously I was making these really large scale installations.
I remember.
So yeah, I think of the drawings as sort of blueprints or plans for
Yeah.
installations that I would like to make in the future. You know, and I do think of them as large scale. I envision them as something you could walk into, a space that you could enter into. So definitely, yeah.
Lovely.
That's my plan. That's my intention, getting back to working in that way.
Good. Good. More aspirations. Yeah. Good. Thank you so much. And thank you for being part of this, Renee.
Yeah, thank you for putting this together.
Oh, it's lovely to see you. Yeah. Abner, I see that you've joined us, even though you're on your way back, or maybe you're back from Reno. Is that right?
I am.
Thank you for coming.
I made it back from Reno safely.
Excellent. I'm glad you're safe. Well, I know everyone would want to hear more about your films. And I hope that we have some of the kids on Facebook Live with us. I encourage them to come and both see themselves and see their friends in these films. So you might be addressing some of your actors.
We should have had them come perform the piece live.
Oh,
really.
What a good idea. Well, do you want to talk a little bit about these films?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, mostly I've been thinking a lot about, like, it does seem so long ago that we could all like be in a theater together doing this. And I had this, when I was driving today, I remembered like just making the piece, which was all a little like last minute and kind of haphazard, despite it looking, I think, pretty, reasonably polished. And I had made printed scripts because, even though the kids like memorized everything, I thought, well, I should have them. And then I forgot them. So my daughter, who was with me helping, was like frantically writing them. Anyway, it's, like mostly now I'm just like lamenting the us not being in the world in that way anymore. But I mean, when you asked me to be in, I have a long history with Arts Ed as a teacher and as a board member, and it was sort of like a weird kismet. And when you were asking me to do this show, we had recently watched some award ceremony with my kids, and my son Wyatt was kind of like making fun, and kind of like he was aping kind of some of the speeches that were given in a kind of sarcastic way, and I just started thinking about that. And at the same time, this was like not the same night, but days later, thinking about the opportunity for this show. And I thought it would be great to have, like, it was great to just see Wyatt like perform this in a kind of funny way. So I just started thinking about that, just, it wasn't really like completely thought out. But then if you start digging into the history of like award speeches, I guess I should explain the piece for people that don't know. Basically, like I asked kids from Arts Ed players to perform kind of historical Oscar award speeches. I think the earliest might be the Sally Field one.
Right.
That, all had some sort of message, political, sort of personal, social, they were engaging the world in some way. And that was really just the idea. I mean, I was pretty interested in like what I assumed would be like the slippages that would happen, like I thought pretty much from the beginning, like the idea of the piece, the title for the piece being rehearsal, like thinking about and sort of hoping that there would be like problems, of one kind or another. Like they would be imperfect, perfectly imperfect. And a lot of that happened, and you can see that in the piece. I mean, I was interested in like the kids performing these things as a way to kind of reveal, in some ways, like the essence of the message, and also like, the ridiculousness of sort of the platform for, whoever it is, Leonardo DiCaprio is, a climate activist or whatever it is. So all of that, but, just in thinking about back now, like I was really, I like the idea of like starting with this little kernel of like an idea that's not super well, it has all the contours of something that's thought out, but like then seeing what happens, and the happenstance of you in rehearsal and us using that space, and me bringing in a friend to help me do the filming, all kind of happening last minute. That was all, part of it for me, even though it's, parts of it seem really finished, I guess.
Yeah.
Well,
oh, good. We're going to see some of it.
We have to be able to hear
my
it.
life, truly. This means so much more to me this time. I think the first time I hardly felt it because it was all so new. I'd like to thank the cast, to my players, to Lindsay, John, and Danny, and Ed and Amy, and to my little friends, Jamie and Yankton. I owe a lot to my family for holding me together and loving me and having patience with this obsession of me. But I want to thank you. I haven't had an orthodox career, and I wanted so much more to have your respect. The first time I didn't feel it, but this time I feel it, and I can't deny that the fact that you like me right now, you like me. Thank you.
I mean, it's like she was too good is really the problem.
That's what I was about to bring up. I think one of the things that happened the day of the filming was that Abner realized there wasn't going to be a lot of slippage.
Yeah.
The kids were just nailing it, right?
Yeah, it was just like, I mean, I kind of knew it. I mean, I knew the caliber of performer that, that's in that crew. I just thought, that my somewhat lack of preparation would at least create some more wonkiness, but the kids were just too pro. They made up for my, my poor direction or whatever it was in most cases, and also, I mean, it certainly, I mean, the Kismet was also thinking about these kids in a deep way. I mean, they're all ambitious. They all, they may not all want to be, on the Oscar stage at some point, but they are ambitious in a way that could get them there. So, I mean, that was certainly part of it too. Originally, I was like, oh, maybe I could have my son, before I was even, when I was just noodling it, I was like, maybe I could have Wyatt just do the kind of like jokey thing he was doing. But then, the being asked to do the show, I was like, oh no, of course it should be these kids who, really want to be on this stage.
I think it was such an interesting project for the kids because, as you say, some of them have so much aspiration and they loved it as a project. And what was crazy is they were in the middle of another performance.
No, it was opening that night, right? I mean, it was just like the whole thing was like crazy that they could do that. Anyway, we can.
We're going to hear from Leo. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Very much on behalf of our producers, Kathy Glynn and Michael Donovan from Canada. I'd like to thank the Academy for this. I've invited my fellow documentary nominees on the stage with us, and we would like to. They are here in solidarity with me because we like nonfiction. We like nonfiction, and we live in fictitious times. We live in the time where we have fictitious election results that elects a fictitious president. We live in the time where we have a man sending us to war for fictitious reasons, whether it's the fictition of duct tape or the fictitious of orange alerts. We are against this war, Mr. Bush. Shame on you, Mr. Bush. Shame on you. And anytime you've got the Pope and the Dixie Chicks against you, your time is up. Thank you very much.
Yeah. And yeah, like, I mean, that one maybe in particular, but you know, a lot of them, like, I mean, I was certainly, you know, I didn't expect that we would still be talking about this piece, you know,
Right.
2 days after the, you know, has it just been 2 days that we have officially a new president? But you know, like, I'm glad to see that now. You know, I mean, I was certainly thinking about everything that was going on. So the timing is nice that we're still for a lot of the work in this show that we're still talking about it
Yep.
now in November.
Yep.
So,
No, it still feels very urgent.
yeah.
I mean, even if it was another bad president, whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Hey, Emily, I have to leave.
Okay, Richard,
I
thank
have
you
to.
so much for joining us.
No, I wish I could stay longer, but we
Terrific.
talked about it. So
Yeah. Okay.
all this stuff's great. It's fantastic.
Bye,
Okay, thank
Richard.
you so much,
Nice to-
everybody.
It's nice to
Okay.
see your face,
see you.
buddy.
Lovely to
You
see
too,
you.
man.
Let's see. First of all, Abner, it was wonderful. I'm so glad we had a chance to show some of the work, and I wanted to thank you. I wanted to just ask you one more question, and it's the question that I asked all of the artists in this show. During this time of COVID, has it been helpful for your work? Have you seen it that way? Has it been that for you?
No.
No. Yeah.
I mean, no, I don't think so. I mean, you know, I mean to the extent that that piece is a reminder about like how important it is for me to be in the world in lots of different ways. You know, I mean, as a teacher, making work, you know, in terms of how I make work and just interacting with, you know, colleagues and strangers alike. Yeah, I've never been one of those that can hide out in the studio and be happy.
Yeah.
I've realized more than ever how much I need the world for making sense of it. So, yeah.
Well, I look forward to your making more work, just as I look forward to us opening this world up. Thank you again.
My pleasure.
Yeah. Let's see, is that a Helio there in the corner with no hair? A Helio, come talk to us about the dark mirror. Let's see, I think you need to unmute yourself.
Am I good?
Yes, you are.
Yeah, so it's did I miss the raise the glass?
We haven't. You have not missed that. Thank you
Oh.
for reminding me.
All right. I brought a glass.
Good. Well,
And I
we
don't-
can all do
So-
that.
I raised mine. But I'll raise it again. I will raise it again.
All right.
So it's I call it a black mirror. And I think it was I think I took the word see literally to make a kind of mirror that has this sort of distortion. And I just sort of started that way, and then I kind of let myself just, as I do in the studio, it's kind of a playful space for me. And then I just start rearranging things and cutting things up and putting things back together. And then I initially, I think I kind of destroy something. And then I try to fix it again in a way that maybe makes more sense to me. And then that led to you know, what would I put inside this frame? So I broke the frame up first, and then made this this sort of graphite. You can see those little sections inside that are they're segmented based where the inside corners of the frame are. And so there's a bunch of little sections that were determined by those little corners. And those panels are made of graphite, and graphite, you know, working with graphite for a long time. And I really love the idea or the fact that the graphite is lived material from millions of years ago. So this is its second life, sort of. And I thought that we would look back into it, like almost as if we could say hello again to it, because it is the same stuff that we're made of. You know, I wasn't thinking in those terms in the studio when I'm making it. Even the language that I'm using now to describe this thing is still still uncomfortable to me, because it's not really, it's the closest thing I can come to try to describe, you know, what I had done. But when I was making it, I wasn't thinking so much in those terms, except for the beginning part where I wanted to destroy this mirror. So yeah, that's and then it's interesting that you know, how these times have actually made me, and I've made everybody kind of re-examine everything, to rethink everything, how we see all things. But maybe the reflect, yeah, I don't know. It's actually grown into more work like that. I've been making more pieces like that, but really creating many more cuts in the mirror and reassembling them in ways that are almost virus-like. So the frame actually looks like it's kind of multiplying now in a kind of tumorous sort of growth-like way. So it's kind of grotesque on one level, but it's a golden frame, so it's also glittery and luxurious, but it's a tumorous growth. So it has these funny opposites that somehow are reconciled in the piece. And I like that. Like, that's what I love art so much, is that we can reconcile these sort of very disparate ideas that you would think have no place being together, and somehow they make sense when they're in that same space, on the same object, reconciled through these sort of decisions that I make that
And
yeah.
this was the beginning of a body of work that you are still involved with, is it not? Yeah.
But I mean, many times more, much more replicative. So the frame, instead of being kind of this frame is sort of just broken up and then reconfigured.
Yeah.
The frame I'm making now, I've actually cut up in much more complex ways, so that the frame actually is growing in places and has these massive tumor-like growths in them also.
Yeah.
Really, I'm really excited about it. It's created a whole new direction for me.
That's great.
Yeah, it's funny that it's happening during this time where like this viral, issue that's happening with us
Right.
with COVID is the same kind of growth and spread that's happening now.
Well, yeah, you're speaking about it as if it was partly a diagram of an illness or as you say. So it is interesting.
Yeah, I when I'm in the studio, I just sort of I used to be way more rational about my work and be very deliberate about what I'm doing, and it all comes from that sort of grad school rational sort of thinking, and had to defend my work and justify things. And now I'm not so concerned about that. I'm kind of simultaneously trying to be thoughtful, but also I want to, derive some sort of pleasure from this. And I also want to say something about the world, or, it's that it's tough to bring words to this because I actually am much more comfortable and I get less stuck when I don't have to articulate it in words. Like I enjoy looking at the piece and I'm satisfied that that's my explanation. Like the explanation is there.
Right.
I'm not in here.
Right.
And I'm more and more comfortable with it, with that way of thinking about it. So.
Thank you. And I mean, it occurs to me that, maybe the isolation in a weird way has afforded you a kind of privacy so that you feel perhaps more free. I don't know.
That might have a lot to do with it, that I don't have to, I'm not getting the kind of camaraderie I used to have when I had friends who would come over,
Right.
and so I haven't shared my work. A few friends I have, but I am working much more in isolation, and maybe that is. I hadn't really thought about it much in that way, but and in some ways, that this time, in answering the questions that you had been asking everybody about how this time has maybe affected my work. I think in some ways I think my work is, I think I've allowed some of the work to kind of grow in isolation, like a Petri dish. I'm gonna use as many biology metaphors as I can during
That's
this.
right. That's right. A
And,
former biologist. Yes.
and then in other ways, it's the isolation is crushing. Also, like, to not see people, not to hug people, and pat them on the back even when I see them is. So I in some ways it was great. In other ways, it was just terrible. So, like many people, I'm torn in many directions these
So
days.
true. Yeah. Well, Helio, we're so happy to show the work. And I mean, I have to say, I'm not sure how long it's been, but I think you've been a mentor with SF Arts Ed for 25 years. I think on and off, you've been a teacher with us and a set designer and, all kinds of things shown in our work. And yeah, we're delighted that you're still in our family.
Oh, I will always. It's been wonderful, and I'm happy to see that that this is continuing even during this time through this virtually, and
Yeah.
I'm thankful and I'm happy to see it continue.
Thank you for being part of it.
Oh, my pleasure. It's been wonderful.
Let's see, I think I see Alexis there. Is that right? Ah, you've renamed yourself. Good. Alexis, would you speak with us? Hi.
Hello. Hi, everybody. It's so nice to see you guys.
It's lovely to
Um,
see you.
So I'm happy to be a part of the show and really enjoy the other work and hearing you guys talk about it. I think Ahilio, you did a nice job, summing up the challenges of being visually oriented and then having to assess meaning or subscribe meaning to things in succinct ways. Sometimes after the fact, sometimes it comes before, but obviously talking about our work when we're making the visual statement of things can have that challenge. So I appreciated hearing the way that you're putting that, trying to say the closest thing possible to what you want your work to stand for was, I think, a really nice way of capturing that. And I think I kind of took a similar approach where it's visual perception is a big theme in my work. And so that was all the pieces that I have included do actually change color depending on your lighting or viewing angle of it. So just kind of pretty literal. We're not all perceiving the same thing at the same time, and you can be seeing something, one moment and then your own perspective can change. So it's not only that, other people have different perspectives, but your own perspective, is going to shift over time, and recognizing that and being open to it. And then I think, the other way I was thinking about the show, just with the title and the year further, is, 2020 vision as well. Just this concept of, perfect vision is, what 2020 often is. And, I don't think there's really any perfect way to perceive something. And to recognize that in art, of course, can be helpful, but just to take that perspective to everything in the world can benefit all of us. This is a piece, so the previous one that Pete had up was using color changing dichroic film cast in resin. And so it will appear different colors. Sometimes it kind of appears clear, and then all the colors you're seeing will change pretty dramatically depending on the lighting and angle, as I said, and then the shadow that it casts is also a different color from what you're seeing at any given time. And then the next one, Pete, is just using driftwood, kind of a material that I see as having pretty kind of folk art connotations, and trying to take things that have those meanings already built into them and seeing if I can kind of challenge that and use it in a different way. And so it's using automotive paint that's a prismatic light activated paint, so it'll look blue and then, or black, and then in a certain color lighting kind of explode in a prismatic rainbow. And then just playing with that against different materials, concrete, and the texture of concrete and perception of concrete as well. And then acrylic rod there. And then the third piece is also a concrete piece that has a glass crystal sphere in the middle of it, and there's paint under the sphere in the concrete that at times you don't see any of it, and then depending on your angle, the paint kind of fills the whole ball. So, again, kind of reinforcing that, some things your perspective shifting, you don't all see the same things. And then it's also kind of literally illustrating the crystal balls, show everything upside down in the way that our eyes are actually seeing things before our brains see upright images for us. So just kind of talking a little bit about how even once we're seeing things, there's still mechanisms that are changing them and how we're perceiving them, internally in all of us. So that's how I saw all these pieces connecting.
Thank you. And it's so interesting how you and Ahilio took the prompt in a really, very literal, but tremendously interesting way around perspective. And I really love these works.
Thank you.
And wish very much to see them in person. Yeah.
There are pieces that do, it's a challenge making work that relies on interaction in this day and age when so much is about a photograph of something. And we don't get to go see them.
like your other works that we had in the gallery. They were so beautiful. The ones that, as you walked around them, they changed sort of radically because of the way the light was hitting them. I can only imagine these are the same. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alexis, for being part of this. Let's see.
For including me.
Yes. Let's see, we have 2 more artists to speak with. I think we'll speak with Zoe Farmer. Zoe, are you still there?
I'm still here. Hello.
Lovely. Good. Hello.
Hello. It's lovely to see everybody. I'm so glad to tune in and just kind of see familiar faces in a social setting and to talk about my favourite things in the world of art and hearing conversations about it. I think I'm going to mirror Alexis and Ahelio in saying that I don't do best with kind of talking about my work, but I guess the more we practice these things, the better we get. So the piece that I put in for this show, I think because I have a big kind of keen interest in all things sort of biology and marine biology and kind of the lessons that can kind of be learned from nature. And when we were looking to do this show, I think I took the title of the show of Sea Change to look at it in terms of sea change as in ocean change at the moment and in relation to everything that's changing in the world, I guess, including environmental aspects there. And so one of the things about the sort of the cephalopods, and these are prints of octopus, but the octopus octopi are printed in cuttlefish ink. So there's this kind of crossover of like the cephalopod. And I don't know, I mean, octopus, I kind of know too much about octopus because I'm kind of obsessed, but generally they're sort of solitary creatures, but they also seem to be somewhat thriving in a world and in an ocean when so many other creatures seem to be struggling with the temperature changes and things like that. And they just seem to show this incredible resilience and adaptability, and just the idea of using their ink, which they use as a kind of a decoy and protection in themselves. And I know there's kind of lots of layers to it, and I'm still very much learning from it because I primarily come from a sculptural background. So it seems kind of strange to be working on a sort of a 2D surface. But I think one of the main things for this piece for me was probably a lot of it about the sort of the experience of actually manipulating these kind of very fluid bodies, and in part somewhat kind of grotesque. And I think I still have some feelings about what it means to use the dead body of these creatures, which I kind of admire so greatly. I don't know if you guys have seen the film, and if you haven't, you should. But the My Octopus Teacher at the moment, and if you haven't seen it, it's on Netflix, and it gets you to fall in love with this one individual octopus that has a personality. And so they have this huge kind of conflict about using these bodies to kind of produce artwork, using their, I don't know, the stuff that they produce. It's almost like, you know, the way that we do exploit nature for either their bodies, but also for the things that they produce, and in this case, the ink. So I haven't quite worked out, there's these kind of conflicts in it, because on one level it's incredibly beautiful, on one level it feels to be slightly exploitative. I don't know. So there's lots of things that I haven't kind of worked out completely about it, but there is something as an art material, and I think Ahelio was talking about the use of graphite before. There seems so much potential in the use of these natural kind of inks, because much like the graphite, I've done a piece more recently for the show that's up at the moment, and rather than using the print directly onto the octopus, I decided to use the ink as the background on the paper, and it just has this most stunning kind of almost like sheen or metallic kind of quality to the actual ink. And you know, the squid ink varies from the cuttlefish ink, which varies from the octopus ink. Some of it's bluey black, some of it's browny kind of black, and it has this incredible kind of matteness to it. So as a material, I guess I I haven't lost interest in it, and it's something that I think could continue kind of for some time. And I guess I don't want to exploit any species further because it's a contradiction to kind of what I'm doing. And so my hope is that with these things being incredibly successful, they are not on the endangered species list yet. But their worlds are changing. I think there's a spot in Australia where suddenly now there's like a whole community of octopus that live closely together, which is not the norm. That is changing. They're noticing different patterns and living in much closer kind of proximity to each other. So I guess overall the projection of this piece is just, you know, one day it might be like octopus and jellyfish soup with a whole lot of other species that are no longer there. But yeah, I don't know. And I just think also at the moment with all the things we're talking about COVID, I kind of, in a very basic and I guess childlike way, I look at them for a metaphor for kind of resilience and adaptability and change and survival, I think. So yeah, that about summarizes it.
Thank you. I wanted to say too that in our gallery, we have an actual exhibit up, our first in all of these months. And the exhibit is Zoe's exhibit, the second exhibit of her artist in residency in the gallery. And it's her work, and it's also the work of her students. And it's you can come and see it on Saturdays. And it's quite extraordinary. More of these prints and other wonderful things as well. And Zoe, you've been with us as a mentor for at least 6 years. Is that right?
I think it's, yeah, I think it must be at least that. I think Chad remembered last time. I just remember it was a couple of years before I got pregnant with Emilio. So I'm going to say 7.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Lovely. Thank you. Thank you so much. And we're going to finish our discussions and hopefully a little bit of the work with Pete Belkin, who is a new mentor with us and also is working with our staff this year, luckily. He's a filmmaker and many other things. And so I'm going to turn it over to you, Pete.
Thanks, Emily.
So show some of your beautiful movie.
Thanks, Emily. Yeah, so the work in the exhibition is titled Bodhi Bodhi, which is simultaneously named after the biggest ghost town in California, and also the man that essentially brought it to existence, Waterman Bodhi, who was a prospector from New York. And it's kind of a strange place. It's both sort of a tourist destination. You'll see lots of people visiting. And the ghost town itself has been preserved sort of in a state of arrested decay, and it's maintained by the state of California. And it's almost become a sort of outdoor museum. But the interesting story about the prospector, that, you know, he came from New York looking for gold, like during the gold rush, like many others. And he never found anything during his entire time looking in the mountains of the Eastern Sierras. But nevertheless, sort of towards the end of his life, he got caught up in a blizzard. But towards the end of his life, sort of more and more people were coming to that area and looking and looking. And essentially, very shortly after him passing, that gold and other precious materials were found in the region. So it's a strange sort of story about someone that's, you know, dedicates their entire life looking for this something, and only after they're sort of gone that this that it turns into the biggest sort of. It was the 3rd largest town in California. It has something like 10,000 people living in it at once. Wow. But what's interesting is it's been really preserved, and it's really in high elevation Sierras, so it has really, really harsh climate there. Sort of battered by the high elevation and the snow, and but it's been sort of mummified. And I made several trips to the location. I think my first trip was during the day when there was lots of other people looking at the site, and then I realized I have to go back and try to catch that place at a different hour in the day. So I ended up going there actually when I went there to shoot. Really, really early in the morning, and I drove through the night, and I remember arriving at this long dirt road that leads to the town, and right before sunrise, because I really wanted to get sort of the sun coming up over the town. I remember being sort of very, very eerie, strange feeling, sort of arriving in this place that's kind of been frozen in time, essentially. And yeah, so in a way, I was really kind of drawn to just how a place can really sort of be frozen and preserved, and also exist today because it's a sort of a place where people come and check out a bit of California history. And there's a really strange thing that I noticed, which I think comes through in the film, that there was a lot of the preserved, the interiors of the buildings, of many of them, were preserved, and a lot of them you could only look through the windows. And something about looking through the windows into a place which existed a long time ago, but it's still there. And there was this really strange separation of sort of like looking into a past. And I think that's one of the things that sort of drew me just to start thinking about windows as sort of passageways into a different dimension, I guess, essentially, a different time at least. And actually, like, as one of the prompts, the film was finished before the sort of pandemic happened. But one of the things that, the prompt that I created, thank you, Chad, the prompt that I created was really for people to start looking at their windows as a way to sort of, work with your imagination. And I called for people to sort of like make collages or start adding images to the window as a sort of way to, just work with the imagination and think about that piece of glass that separates you from outside as something that you can really work with. I guess I'll show a bit of the film now. Just give me a moment, I'll cue it up. So I guess, the clip I showed, the sort of, that clip starts with a sort of pan over a window. And also at the same time, I do a lot of sort of set work, working on sets, and a lot of times on sets, windows are treated in a really specific way where there's often the part of the window that is the window sash, there's a really thin line in it. And in photography and video work, that's often where sort of images are dropped behind a set. So you will see if something is shot inside of an interior, and outside of the window, you see the outside. That's really, that line around the window is really that sort of separation between, I guess, reality and fiction. So I was, thinking about that line in windows and how it separates us from something else. And then really thinking about weather, because, and not just the weather in Bodie and the high Sierras, but just weather in general, as something that's, that we don't really have control over. And it's, weather and climate. And I went to Bodie actually, that time was the late fire season last year, was my last trip. And it was, it was a really eerie time. It was the first I remember, like, everyone remembers the smoke over the Bay Area last year, and just thinking about what's happening to the natural world, and how it's our relationship to the natural world, and how it's really such a delicate balance. And so I was thinking about water and fire and just all of the natural forces that are kind of beating on this town throughout the year. I'd like to show one more clip that's sort of towards the end of the film. Just one sec.
Thank you so much, Pete.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. So just one quick thing about that last scene, which is this fire, and I captured it on the way back from visiting Bodie. And there's several ways out of the Eastern Sierras, and I think we drove through, or near Yosemite, I think it's the Tioga Pass. And I remember driving and then seeing smoke on the sides of the highways and on the highway, and wasn't really sure if it's, wildfire, something you always worry about. And I was drawn to pull over and film a little bit. And I realized there was actually a controlled burn that was happening. And it was a really strange sight, because the smoke really kind of hung low to the ground, and it sort of like didn't move much, and you didn't even really smell the fire that much. And it was this very eerie, strange sight to see that this fire was basically controlled and burning part of the forest in the Sierras. And it was a strange, also just like sort of reminder coming out of this place, Bodie, which is just, battered by the elements throughout the year, and then seeing this bit of controlled fire as a way, as people are attempting to deal with sort of the condition of the climate that we're all faced with today, and sort of the controlled burn as being one way that to sort of address that. So yeah, those are the clips from the film.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I mean, it really does remind me too that this last 8 months it's been about a lot of things politically, obviously, but it's the climate and the burning and it's not just been about being locked up, but locked up in such a difficult, distressing time for our climate. Well, we've come to the end of our evening, and I want to thank you so much for all of you to speak to your work, to speak to this time. And just to remind you all that the show is in 2 places now. It's not only on our own website, but it's also on the Minnesota Street Project adjacent site, which is their site for the virtual shows that are happening coming out of the galleries at Minnesota Street. And we're delighted that we're part of that. We're obviously part of the building and part of their virtual exhibition. I look forward to seeing you all in person soon, and look forward to, you know, better changes in the future. I think we've begun. So with that, I'm going to say good night, and also let's raise our glasses, you know. Thank you so much. Thank you, Pete, for putting
Thank you.
this together so beautifully.
Thank you
Thank you,
so much.
Chad. I know you're there somewhere. And thank you to all of the artists.
Bye all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Nice to see
Thank
you
you so
all.
much.
Great to see
Nice
everybody.
to see you all.
Thank you.
Bye. See you soon.
Bye.
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 It was wonderful having a chance to exchange. We've been hungry for it, I think.
I loved it. I loved it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.